The opening round of 2025 was incredibly unpredictable, with damp circumstances throwing a kink in the proceedings right away. Even before the weather, many midfield drivers, Tsunoda, Albon, Gasly, and Sainz, upset the frontrunners in qualifying. On race day, while rain made direct comparisons difficult, Williams and VCARB demonstrated strong pace. This puts more pressure on the top teams ahead of this weekend's Chinese Grand Prix, where a new technical directive could impair performance, especially for a few of the elite teams. As previously stated on the channel, the FIA is implementing new methods to regulate the mini DRS phenomena, which is becoming increasingly common in the field. McLaren were the first to test the regulatory boundaries with their rear wings in Baku last year. During the winter, the FIA decided that stricter tests and restrictions were necessary. This was in response to concerns that teams have discovered ways to pass the FIA's static testing, which measure wing flexing, while still benefiting from the aeroplasticity of flexi-wings on the track. Despite the fact that a new technical directive was scheduled to be implemented during the Spanish Grand Prix, Round 9, the FIA took a proactive approach this week. Last weekend in Australia, the sporting body of Formula 1 installed new cameras to monitor rear wing movement. Their response was swift and emphatic, introducing new guidelines for teams to follow at the Chinese Grand Prix. Additional limitations and testing will be implemented during the third round in Japan. The goal is to entirely eliminate this grey area by the end of 2025. The FIA's early implementation of a new technical directive suggests that some teams benefited from a flexible rear wing. Although the performance benefit of this component is unknown, changing their wings to comply with the regulations should cost certain teams a few tenths per lap. The question that immediately arises is who will be most affected. According to a research by the Italian Motorsport, there are 4 major teams accused of benefiting from flexi-wings in Australia: Ferrari, McLaren, Alpine, and Haas. At this point, determining which teams were stretching the boundaries of the regulations is challenging. However, Red Bull has been hot on the reintroduction of potential mini DRS trickery since Formula 1's pre-season test, so the FIA's decision to promptly ban the practice must be viewed as a victory for it. As the team that was possibly the most disappointed by the FIA's delay in imposing a ban on flexi front wings until mid-season, Red Bull welcomes the governing body's no-nonsense approach to rear wings for China this weekend. This is especially true given that Red Bull, which was previously the master of flexi wings under earlier rules, has admitted that it is an area where others have gained far more than it has with the current cars. Over the winter, technical director Pierre Wacher said that he believed his team's advantage in the ground effect era had been eroded by rivals' ability to utilize flexi wings, which countered an advantage it had discovered in improving vehicle balance without aero-elasticity gimmicks. With McLaren, Mercedes, and Ferrari all pushing hard on the flexi-wing front, Wacher said, "We had some other aspect of the car which allowed us to rebalance the car. We benefited from this for 2 years. The others introduced this front-wing deflection to allow them to balance the car, and, in that aspect, they are now in front of us. We could rebalance the car by other means, while the other teams used front-wing deflection." According to Wacher's statements, Red Bull believes that anything that can reverse the gains made by others using flexi-wings will be beneficial, especially as it tries to catch up to a dominant McLaren car. As one squad member stated, "The stiffer the wings get, the better it is for us." However, while Red Bull enters the Shanghai weekend, boosted by a stronger than expected start to the season in Australia and the knowledge that some of its rivals' antics have been shut down, it is unclear how much it stands to benefit from what has occurred. And that is something we may not find out in China, since it may take some time for things to settle before we get to the front wing changes coming to Spain. F1 teams have always been aware that the technical regulations allow the FIA to crank up bodywork deflection tests anytime there is reason to believe someone is tampering with flexible wings. It is a freedom that has been utilized numerous times over the years, but like with the new front wing checks due for the Spanish Grand Prix, any intended changes are usually announced well in advance. The FIA's attitude is generally pragmatic, in that it does not want to rush any changes, because doing so would make things tough for any teams who need to make improvements to their car on the track. The FIA's decision to exercise its right to make a quick alteration to rear wing load testing for the Chinese GP, giving teams only 5 days' notice before cars return to the track, demonstrates how concerned it must have been about the latest Mini DRS's issue. Based on rear wing monitoring at the Australian Grand Prix, as well as garage checks, the FIA concluded that teams were pushing too hard. Flexible rear wings had been on the radar since the pre-season test in Bahrain, when onboard footage of several cars revealed that several teams appeared to be using a significant amount of aeroelasticity in the back. The FIA evidently felt there were enough grounds to investigate further, and for the Australian Grand Prix, it expanded rear wing monitoring with additional onboard high-definition cameras. It also performed additional load testing in garages on specific autos to double-check things. The FIA's scrutineering data show that there appeared to be an increased emphasis on wings and bodywork over the Melbourne weekend. Following qualifying, Max Verstappen's Red Bull, George Russell's Mercedes, and Carlos Sainz's Williams all had aerodynamic and bodywork checks, which included front and rear wing rule compliance. Following the race, Lando Norris's winning car was subjected to 4 separate rear wing stress deflection tests. The FIA listed these as a vertical and angled rear wing mainplane deflection test, as well as a rear wing mainplane tip deflection test and a rear beam wing deflection test. While all of the cars involved passed these checks, the FIA's decision to adjust the checks for China demonstrates that what it saw on track, where cars cannot be examined, was not adequate. The FIA explicitly states in the periodically updated TD34 Technical Directive on Bodywork Flexibility that just because a wing passes the load testing in the garage does not mean it fully complies with the standards. It adds that wings will be considered illegal if they have designs whose structural characteristics are altered by secondary parameters so as to produce a different deflection characteristic while running at the track than when stationary during the FIA checks. Secondary parameters include temperature, aerodynamic load, and so forth. The FIA's decision to move swiftly, with the implication that there were sufficient grounds to do something following what it witnessed in Melbourne, demonstrates that it was dissatisfied with what the teams were doing. The new regulation, which decreases the slot gap movement tolerance in its test from 2 mm to 0.75 mm, starting with this weekend's Chinese Grand Prix, and then to 0.5 mm, will drive teams to either reinforce their wings or utilize designs that do not exploit the Mini DRS's phenomena. It is thought that the decision to change the tests is not intended at a specific squad, but rather at reducing what has become an increasingly widespread strategy across the board. And while we can be certain that every team would say that the adjustments will have no substantial impact on their performance this weekend, it would be equally ridiculous to suggest that teams were experimenting with flexible rear wings without intending to benefit from them. A high-performance Mini DRS is more than just lowering drag on the straight to increase top speed for pure lap time. It can have a knock-on effect by allowing a team to run greater downforce at the rear, which helps improve cornering speeds and tyre management. And at a time when achieving the right car balance becomes vital, just look at how important tyre maintenance was in Melbourne's final sector last weekend. Tiny alterations here can have big effects. Red Bull will undoubtedly be interested to see whether there is any noteworthy change in pecking order this weekend, just as it is eager to see how the changes coming to Spain will shake things up once more. The team did not have the flexi front wing acrobatics stopped as soon as it would have liked, but it will be pleased that any rear wing tricks will be prohibited in race 2.